Hi guys, this is Jen Curtis, pregnancy and postnatal fitness specialist, and today I want to talk about supine exercises during pregnancy. This is a topic that I get asked about an awful lot, and most women are worried about, and fitness instructors that work with pregnant women are worried about this, but also confused about the guidelines. It's one of those areas where guidelines are changing quite a lot in the past few years, that to kind of keep up with the research. It's also one of the topics where in the past the rationale has always been better safe than sorry, which is certainly the rationale nowadays, but we just have a little bit more information to account for the grey in between. So in this video, I really just want to talk about that grey in between a little bit, and discuss when it might be appropriate, when it might not be appropriate, and just kind of break down the issue so that you understand risks, rewards versus who it might be appropriate for versus when it might be appropriate. So firstly, just to outline the issue, the reason why we're concerned about women lying on their back during pregnancy is that beyond a certain point, when the weight of the baby in the uterus is significant, we are concerned that, and studies have shown, and there has been clinical evidence of the weight of the baby in the uterus pressing down on the vena cava, which is the major vein that takes blood back to the heart from the lower body, and that it could compress the vena cava and really make the woman feel quite poorly. So when this happens, I have to say now that there are quite few reported cases. It's not something that happens very often. But when it does happen, symptoms are really quite dramatic and unpleasant. As far as I know, it's never happened to me, but I've heard that, you get very lightheaded. Sometimes there's tingling in the legs, or just a general feeling of discomfort, and that the woman can become quite breathless, and that it's really quite an unpleasant sensation. So obviously we want to avoid this happening. So guidelines in the past have been just across the board, do not lie on your back beyond a certain point during pregnancy. So let's talk about the grey in between that's like a little bit more interesting. So I think current guidelines from ACOG, the American Congress of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they currently still recommend that we don't have women lie on their backs after 16 weeks. I happen to be 16 weeks today, don't have much of a tummy yet, and I'm still sleeping on my back quite a lot, and waking up after hours on my back. Nothing adverse happening so far, not much of a bump there, not much weight going on, but these are still the guidelines that ACOG give us currently today. However, if you look at Sports Medicine Australia, they recommend avoiding supine exercises after 28 weeks. So you can see there's quite a different, depending on the organization or the authority that you go to, you're going to get conflicting information. So, this is something that's important to realize, is not necessarily every single body that regulates exercise or recommends exercise necessarily has the same guidelines, or are coming to the same conclusion based on the studies that we have. So in a report or a study from the British Journal of Medicine, or I think it's the British Journal of Gynecology, It does show that uterine blood flow, so blood flow to the uterus, actually decreases when a woman lies on her back for an extended period of time. Now, what an extended period of time is could be different from woman to woman, but it does show that there's less blood flow going to the uterus, which may be a concern even if we aren't experiencing bad symptoms ourselves. However, during exercise, the decrease is about half of what it is during rest. So this shows that when you're doing a supine exercise, there's still more blood flow going. The blood flow is increased relative to just lying on your back and resting. So lying on your back and just sleeping or just doing nothing. So that's a kind of overview of the current guidelines or the major bodies that are involved in these kinds of decisions. But just to muddy the waters and make things more complicated, as I mentioned before, lots of women wake up even very late in pregnancy after lying on their back, and they've experienced absolutely no problems whatsoever. Does that mean that I'm saying go and exercise, everyone can exercise on their back? Absolutely not. Just that there are lots and lots and lots of women who are waking up on their back, who are spending lots of time on their back, and who aren't experiencing any negative symptoms. The other thing that I would kind of want to throw into the mix, just to be the devil's advocate from the other side, is that there aren't really many exercises that are worth doing on your back during pregnancy. The only ones, because we don't really want to be doing core, traditional core type crunch exercises. I mean, I've expressed my tendency to avoid them in most cases anyway. And during pregnancy, when the abdominal muscles are stretched out over a bump, the bigger the bump, the less we really want to be doing those crunchy type exercises. It doesn't leave an awful lot left that we could really be doing on our backs. The only things that I would really have a woman doing on her back are, one, glute bridges, which is easily solved if we don't want a woman lying on her back. So the guidelines are that if she feels uncomfortable on her back, to get her off and put her on a 15-degree incline, and that very slight incline will relieve the pressure. But we could get a woman out of a glute bridge just lying on the floor and lifting her pelvis up. We could just take her to a hip thrust where the shoulders are elevated in relation to the hips, and then you hip thrust up. And I'll try and link to a hip thrust and a glute bridge in the description so that you guys can see what that looks like. But that's quite easy to solve that problem. Glute bridges are just one option for doing glute work, and there's really no need for her to be doing that if she doesn't feel good. The hip thrusts are probably actually a better glute exercise than a glute bridge. And the other one that I would possibly have women do is a bench press. Beyond a certain point in pregnancy, we wouldn't want her lying doing push-ups with that front-loaded kind of exercise where her belly's sort of really hanging down. But there are a couple of good, and again, that's beyond a certain point, and it's about avoiding the push-up thing, is about avoiding putting too much pressure on the front of the abdomen and putting too much pressure on that linea alba. But again, that's a grey area. But there's, and either so I possibly would have women doing a bench press with a barbell or with dumbbells, or maybe even a floor press where she's pressing up from the floor. They're really the only things that I would have a woman do during pregnancy anyway, which some people may disagree with. but they're really quite easily solved as well. Similar to the glute bridge and hip thrust situation, you can really just put someone on an incline bench. The other problem with a bench press is getting under the bar and getting onto the bench can be quite difficult, especially when you've got a big belly and you don't want to be doing a big crunch or a big sit-up kind of action. So a really easy way to fix that is to put her on an incline. So kind of do an incline bench, and you can do that with dumbbells. You can do that with a barbell, but you could also do an incline push-up or press-up, as you say in Britain, where she's doing a press-up or push-up, but instead of off the floor, so that she's like in a high plank position, we elevate the arms so that her body's at less of an angle relative to the floor. So these can be really easy ways of getting out of those positions and really good alternatives. And if she's at a point where she's super heavy, she's got a really big belly and she doesn't want to be doing front-loaded stuff, or it's not appropriate to be doing front-loaded stuff, or it's not appropriate to be getting her lying back even on a slight incline, we could just do a shoulder press and keep her seated, doing a shoulder press with dumbbells. It's not the same, it's not using the pecs, but it is a press, and it will have some of the same effects and be a kind of easier exercise for her to get into and out of. My point is, in this kind of very long-winded explanation, is there aren't really many exercises that are worth her while doing on her belly, on her back anyway. So it's kind of a non-issue for a lot of women. But to kind of summarize the whole video and to kind of summarize the whole topic, that if you're sort of coaching women, and first of all, if anyone feels bad, even slightly bad, lying on their back for any length of time whatsoever, then she shouldn't do it. She should try and avoid it completely. We do know that only a very, very small number of women actually experience this complaint, but when they do experience it, it's really, really unpleasant. So one way of looking at it is that anyone who experiences this shouldn't do it. And other people, you might want to do it, but you still want to weigh up the risks versus rewards. Now, if you're coaching a lot of pregnant women in a big class scenario, or if you're pregnant yourself and you're just not sure, there's not much you can do on your back that's worthwhile anyway, so the rewards aren't really that great. The risks aren't that great either, but maybe you just don't want to take the risk. If you're running a big class for pregnant women, maybe you just don't want to do anything on your back, on their backs, because if you've got 20 women in a class, there's no way you can monitor everyone and double check that everyone feels fine. Maybe you can say that to everyone. If anyone feels even slightly bad, that's something that you have to decide yourself as a fitness professional, and how educated or how likely the women that you're training are to say, I don't feel good, I'm not going to do this, or are they just going to push through? So you just really have to weigh up the risk rewards. And if you, like me, are working very much one-on-one or in very small groups with pregnant women, then you can have a little spiel about it and just monitor. And if you want them doing some glute bridges or a floor press, you can see if that works for them and get her out of that. You might just not want to make the risk at all. She may be keen to do things like that. You may be pregnant yourself and you're keen to try to do those things. Just know what the symptoms are, what you need to watch out for, and just stop doing it if you feel bad. It's really as simple as that. And like most things to do with pregnancy fitness, there are risks, there are rewards with everything, and we need to weigh them up. And in this specific instance, the risks, the chances that you won't feel good in this position are not that high. But if you do feel bad, then the risk it's not a very pleasant thing to experience. And on the other hand, the rewards aren't that great either. So maybe it's just not worth doing it. But it's up to you as a fitness professional working with this population, or as a pregnant woman yourself. It's just a decision that you have to make, decide what's right for you. I personally I'm still doing glute bridges as part of my warm-ups, and I feel fine. The moment that anything feels slightly off, I'll stop doing it, if and when that happens. So I hope this kind of broke down the video, the issue for you. The video is a bit longer than I hoped it would be. I hope to keep this one brief, but I hope there's lots of information in there, and that it will help you make an informed decision about what you want to do during your pregnancy, or help other women to do the same. I hope that was helpful. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you know anyone that could benefit from this information, please send it on to her. And if you and if you want to see more videos like this, just hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. That's it for today. Bye.